Ask the Podcast Coach for August 10th, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from theschoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. A very happy Saturday morning because we got power back on Sunday. We went 100 hours without power. It's surprising, but we podcasted. We got through it. Everything backed up. Learned a lot of lessons. Spent a good chunk of it talking about it on Home Gadget Geeks. But it's great to be here in a cool house.
Well,
you know how that feels.
Yeah, we might talk about that a little later. You pay for things that are important because I celebrated last Saturday by having my water heater just completely, just the bottom fell out of it.
The bottom fell out? Is that
I'm not really sure. I just looked at I went to turn off the lights. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I hear the dehumidifier, and I'm like, oh, in the basement. I'm like, okay, well, it rained today. That makes sense. And then I heard the sound of a stream going through my basement. I was like, that's it. And I turned on the light, and it's just this big pond at the bottom of my steps. And I was like, well, we're not going to bed. We thought we were, but we're not. So that was fun. But when it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you need a little pickup to keep you going, what'll do that? That's right. The old coffee pour. And that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. The beautiful thing about Mark is, number one, award-winning graphic artist, and he's a podcaster. So you don't have to go through the whole, well, it's kind of like a radio show. He's done a lot of artwork for me. My last one was Podcast Hot Seat. He's done your podcast website, the School of Podcasting, Ask the Podcast Coach. And Mark is going to sit down with you one-on-one and make sure that whatever you're having Mark do. Now, we talk a lot about artwork, but he can also do a full website. If you have a handout you want to have him make, a PDF, something like that, he can take whatever your ideas are and make them pretty. And more importantly, he's going to make sure that they match your brand. So tell him what your show is about. Let his marketing mind come up with the material, and you will be amazed. I think the last 3 or 4, the first thing he's come up with, I'm like, yeah, that. And then there's like no tweaks needed. So when you need to look good, there's only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co.
And of course, big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. This week over there, Braveheart. If you haven't watched that, you ought to. And then Hatfield and McCoy's and The Walk. That's a true story this week. The Walk, a triumphant true story. It's got a guy walking across it. He obviously does this high wire thing across. That scares the bejesus out of me. I get nervous just looking at pictures like that. Anyways, available over there today if you need something to listen to or a new podcast. Check it out today, based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
And we're going to start off with highlighting one of our awesome supporters, and that is the one and only Glenn the Geek Hebert, who celebrated 16 years for the Horse Radio Network. And he had sent in a note. He said, hey, I've hosted over 5,000 episodes, and I want to say you guys to know that I am still learning something every week from Ask the Podcast Coach. So, of course, Glenn, famous for the line.
Don't be boring. So
congratulations on 16 years, 5,000. I mean, because he does a daily show. It's Monday through Friday. Yeah. That's a lot of like horse talk. And
be a good run on radio. 16 years on radio would be incredible. Most huge. They move around so much in radio, but Glenn, congratulations. That's a long time and good work. And he's done some really good work. He was very helpful in the early days of this. I remember him coming on and talking about things and he's just a helpful guy. He doesn't, not pretentious, doesn't try to push anybody away, wants to help everybody. So Glenn, thanks for doing that.
The thing, I don't know that he's doing them quite so ginormous anymore, but he used to do these Christmas shows where you'd have all his sponsors donate stuff, and they're giving away thousands of dollars of stuff, and his audience is super engaged. They're sending in Christmas jingles and all sorts of stuff. But which sounds great. It's also a lot of work. So yeah, it's one of those things. I just heard. I got to get this guy on my show. He's a Podpage customer, but I met him. I actually went to dinner with him, and I think it was James Cridlin and Brendan, and he does a show called All the Hacks. And if you want to talk about, shows that stand out, how do I give people information that they can't get anyplace else? He opened 20 bank accounts from 20 different banks on an episode about, what is a good bank account. And I was like, that's doing the work. That is not going to Chat GPT going, what's a good bank account?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or opening them a minute before he does the review of them. I see a lot of that on YouTube where I just got this and I'm gonna review it, and then you're kind of like, you might want to give it a little time.
Yeah.
Work into it. Even we gave it a couple weeks on. I'm forgetting the name of what did we use 2 weeks ago for video. It's escaped my mind. We didn't use it very long. What did we switch?
EV
EV
Mux. Yeah.
EV Mux. Yeah.
Was what we used for a couple. Fine product. I'm back to be happy to be back with my little thumb on the buttons over here. So I'm ready to go. The chat room's still talking about storms. I am about an hour south of Cleveland. So we had a couple limbs down, things like that. But if I go like 20 minutes north, they had 10 feet of water. I don't know what flooded, but downtown Cuyahoga Falls, home of Chrissy Hind of the Pretenders. So, and we should get to this. Rainy Black wants to know what the heck is a note called Casterbation. They're reading my note.
The notes that you put on screen. You have to be very, very careful what you put on screen.
Yeah, that's true. What is OnlyFans, Dave? Yes.
Yeah.
So, Casterbation is something people do when my show isn't growing and I need to do something to help it grow. So often it's equipment. It is it's something that's not the content. Well, here, let me share my screen. So this is from Reddit, from Grew Up in WPG, whatever that stands for. I've learned a lot since I started podcasting, and I'm getting, I'm sorry. Wait, I've got to get it ready. I can't let this go by. And I'm getting back on the pod work. Yeah, no, let's not shoehorn pod into everything. And I'm getting back on the pod work now that I have time again. I find it a lot of my earlier episodes embarrassingly long, poorly edited, and since they were recorded live on Twitch, they just aren't great. Well, congratulations. That's called your first episodes. That most people do that. They don't follow my idea of maybe get some feedback before you launch it, but that's okay. I have 13 episodes out. I want to split episode 1 into 4 parts. So episode 2 into 3 parts, and episode 3 into 3 parts, and episode 4 into 3 parts. I'm unsure how to get that done effectively. Well, if you're looking for something free, it's called Audacity, and you go in and you find the boring parts and you edit them out.
Don't be boring.
And so that's really it. Now, can I change the order of the podcast post-release? Yes, you can. Do I release the newly edited parts as new episodes? Sure, if you want to. But to me, maybe this isn't quite as Casterbation-y as I thought. When I first I thought it was somebody just trying to rearrange the decks on the Titanic kind of thing. But I get it. And I just said, look, there isn't anything. I use the old Valerie Geller line. There is no such thing as too long, only too boring. So if you want to go take episode 1 and edit out the boring parts, but the hard part is if, like this show, a lot of times we'll do callbacks, right? We'll spend 5 minutes talking about the storm, and then we'll talk about Casterbation, and then I'll go to the chat room, and the chat room finally wanted to share their thing about storms and such. And that's my fault because I bring it back in, but I like the chat room. And so to me, yes, it's your show. I always say your podcast is a recipe. It's not a statue. So if you want to do anything to your podcast, yes, you can. You know why? Because you own it. You don't have to ask somebody else. You don't have to ask the marketing department or the legal department. It's your show. If you want to change the name, change the episodes, that whole 9 yards. And since you're only 13 episodes in, I do love when people will say things like, well, I've been doing this a while. I have 6 episodes out. I'm like, really? You know, not that you have to.
Relative. Be kind.
Yeah.
Relative.
Well, it could be
Relatively
6.
long.
Could be 6 episodes over a year. You never know how long they
And you
took it.
can
but-
learn a lot in 6 episodes. You
Yeah.
know, you can, that is, I mean, that's a 6, 12, 20. You'll learn a lot. I mean, after your first couple, you can learn a lot and be like, oh, yeah. I mean, it's that first one, and then you go back and listen to it, and it sounds great. And then you go back a year later, and you're like, God, what was I thinking? That's the worst thing ever, right? And so you just got to, it's all about perspective, right? And
Yeah.
you could go back and do any of those, cut them up, redo them again. If you think the content is good, but it's just in the wrong order. I mean, listen, we have to remember the first cut of Star Wars was terrible, right? That George Lucas showed the early versions of Star Wars to people, and Spielberg goes, I mean, and at the time, I mean, Spielberg, he had Jaws, but he wasn't the guy he is today. Spielberg
Yeah.
goes, and an editor comes in and cuts a bunch of stuff out, moves some things around, without very many reshoots, makes it the masterpiece that it is today.
Yep.
So can bad content be made good? Yes, but oftentimes it takes a very talented editor
Yeah.
to come in. By the way, that person may not be you. That's the thing. I think some people think there's a skill called podcasting, broadcasting, speaking, content creation. There's a skill called editing, right? Of going in, removing. Those aren't necessarily the same skill set. And you may not have both. You may not have either, just to be honest.
Yeah.
But you may not have both. You may have that one of creating the content. You might need a second eye on it to get that brilliant editing that's involved in it. So it's one of those things to remember. You know, again, it was saved. Star Wars was saved in the edit. And
Yeah.
your podcast might be saved in the edit too.
Yeah, not so much the one with Jar Jar Binks. I don't know that they could fix that.
Well, you know what's funny? Well, okay, this is a podcast show, but you know what's funny about that is the generation behind us. Like, we grew up with Star Wars, but
Right.
my kids, they don't think it's so bad. You know, they're kind of like, it's not that bad. They can't figure out why we don't like it so much. So, you know, a little bit of that is perspective as well.
Yeah.
Was Jar Jar the best representative way to do something?
Right.
Probably not. That was probably a bad move. That's not going to age well. It's not aging well today, just to be honest. So but that being said, listen, and I think there's a message there too. You know, if you go too far back in your stuff, it's just aged. You know, it's not. It may not be appropriate if you for some folks even a couple years back. Pull content from there. Maybe.
Oh man.
Maybe not. Probably not.
Yeah.
You know.
I always just tell people, they're like, well, I'm listening to your back episodes. I go, not for gear. Don't ask me live if you're asking gear questions, because
No, right on.
if you go
right
back,
on.
I'm going to be like, oh, get the Behringer mixer and blah, blah. I'm like, no. So, Ray over at Around the Layout podcast, I edited my podcast to get the boring parts out. The only thing that left was the theme song. No,
Well,
he's
it's
got
possible.
a great show.
It's
Yeah.
possible. Listen, I did a solo show this week, and I got done with it, and I always have imposter syndrome when I'm done with a
Yeah.
solo show. I'm like, I should just delete it now. Like, are you kidding me? Then I did some, work on it over the weekend, and I was like, or last night, and I
Yeah.
was like, okay, it's not so bad. I think I'll put it out. But that's the hard part for sure.
Yeah, and DR says, to those that stick their noses up at the mention of Audacity, they have upped their game a whole lot. So no shade on. I just said it was ugly.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, Steve Stewart makes a living editing podcasts using free software.
Yeah,
And
it's super functional. I never even found it ugly. I go to Hindenburg and I'm like, oh my God, what is this mess?
yeah,
Like, are you kidding me? Now, part of that is because I grew up on Audacity. And so that's what I'm good at. That's what I know how to use. Is Hindenburg a mess? No. Is Sony SoundForge a mess? No.
Yeah.
But there's a learning curve it takes to get there, to know, okay, these buttons do this and this does that. I watch you, we've done live demos here, and I watch you do that on Hindenburg, and I don't recognize anything. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to do that. I can get into Audacity and in and out fast. Get it done the way I want it done. I know where the plugins that I use are. I know how to make the edits. I know how to fade in and out, those kinds of things. So part of it is what you're most comfortable with. This is the hard part about reviews, is people do reviews on things that of course they're biased. They have something that
Oh,
they
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but they all do that job. And Audacity is just fine. It works just fine.
Yeah, the beauty of it is, I mean, in the early days of podcasting, it was a little buggy and would crash on a fairly regular basis,
Sure.
but those days are long behind us. It's stable
Yeah.
now, and they recently added the ability to add a mastering track. And so what that's handy for is you've got your, track 1 is me, track 2 is Jim, track 3 is music, track 4 is sound effects, whatever you're doing, right? You have this multiple track thing. And you've added a little bass to me. You took a little bass out of Jim. You've edited each track, and now I want to take this whole thing, and I've adjusted the volume levels. But this is where, for me, I always add a compressor limiter on that master channel just to kind of make everybody a little even, and And then they make plugins for mastering. I have one. It's from the guy that mastered like the Nirvana album or something. And when I turn, it's really subtle, but it adds a little more clarity to your S's and T's and adds a little bottom end, and it does a little compression. And most of the time, only audio nerds will notice the difference. But for me, that's usually what I use a master track for. It's like, okay, I want to, add this to the whole thing, not just on each track. And that actually will speed up your rendering. Because when we talk about plugins, realize every time you add one, you added a few minutes to your export. I was amazed the other day. I was exporting something as a WAV file. I accidentally opened up the wrong kind of project, and I look up and I'm like, oh, I'm in your podcast website. I want to be in Podcast Hot Seat. And I'd already recorded a bunch of stuff, so I just said, select it, export selection as a WAV file. And it was like, poof. And I was like, oh yeah, no plugins, and it's a WAV file, no compression, that whole 9 yards. So when you do plugins, they're fun, but they're not always, they do. I've talked about, when I get bad audio, and there are times when I export, I go out, I refill my water, check this and that, I come back, it's still exporting. I'm like, what's going on? But I'm like, oh, there's a whole lot of, stuff going on with the plugins. So let's talk algorithms. I saw something here. This person was saying, my daughter and I recently started a podcast, and we've now completed 13 episodes. Is there a rule somewhere, like,
The magic number.
one
13.
season equals 30? Yeah. As part of our promotion strategy, we committed to posting each episode on Facebook, that's her, the host, and Instagram, her daughter. Early on, people gave us likes and fantastic feedback in comments, which I'm using as testimonials with permission, but the likes and comments have gone way down, even though I'm confident that the quality of our episodes has remained high. The lack of Facebook engagement is getting me down. Should I continue posting into the void or abandon this strategy? And then the other thing I wanted to point out was this other one I saw talking about YouTube. YouTube went from giving me hundreds of impressions to my new podcast uploads to almost none. I feel like I made the algorithms mad or something. I usually load the audio version on Spotify. They host my RSS. Sorry to hear that. And have YouTube subscribe to the RSS. I uploaded my videos directly to YouTube the other day as an experiment. I uploaded my video to Spotify, hoping it would show up on YouTube. Nope, because when you upload things to Spotify, they only go to Spotify. Why? Because they're Spotify. I thought it would show up on YouTube via the RSS. Instead, YouTube stopped promoting my podcast feed almost completely. Well, there's a couple problems with that. But the one thing I wanted to point out here is, what's the one common thing in both of those situations? An algorithm, right? So if things just stop showing stuff and you haven't changed anything, that's why YouTubers pull their hair out about twice a year, where they were great, they were king of the hill, and then all of a sudden YouTube went, oh, tweak, and all of a sudden you're not showing up. Why? Well, sorry, but the algorithm changed, and what YouTube used to think was cool isn't anymore. What Facebook thought was cool has been changed, and that's why I'm a big fan of sending everybody to your website and make sure they know where that is. Dan says the algorithm gets blamed so often when it's almost likely just the content. Yeah, I think so.
Well, there's a launch effect, right? I mean, in some cases, you have this launch effect. You have
Oh, yeah.
something new that in some of the cases, the algorithm is picking up new. It wants to surface new content. It wants to see if it's good, if it wants to see if people will be looking at it. Some algorithms favor new content over older content. And so you get this launch effect. You also have people who are more willing to try it out one or two times. Like, you go to your friends on Facebook or your Instagram followers or whatever, and you're like, hey, check this out. It's new. Again, a lot of people are willing to test things out new. I don't know about where in Akron, where you live, Dave, but in Bellevue, Nebraska, if we open a new restaurant, it is overrun for like 3 months. They wreck the place. And then nobody goes to it after that. Oh, I'm tired of, and you're like, it just opened. I think the same thing happens in media, that it's new, it's exciting, it's fresh. We download it a couple times, and then we kind of like, nah, I've heard it all now, or no, that isn't what I was really hoping for. And so you see that, the Gartner hype cycle follows podcasts as well. So you see this hype at the very top and the peak, and then go into the trough of disillusionment. And people are like, and you got to survive that dip. This is the thing I think podcasters don't get, is they're going to have a dip in their numbers. You just got to keep going. Like, you can't believe the dip. You got to just get through it. I mean, it is happening. Believe it, it's happening. But you can't believe it's because of you. It's just all these things are kind of going on. You got to keep going. If after a time those numbers don't come back, well, then maybe it is you. And you're like, well, okay, maybe I'm not making content that's interesting or people are picking up on or whatever, right? From that perspective. But you definitely know early on you're gonna have a bump at some point, and then it's gonna go into a trough. It just happens to everybody.
Seth Godin has a book called The Dip, and he talks about that, how a lot of people give up when the dip comes, and it's like, yeah, I got to keep going. Yeah, and that's so for me, I just do YouTube. Like right now, I didn't abandon YouTube because this show shows up every week, but I haven't done just YouTube videos, and I'll be doing those for Podpage here coming up. And I'm actually taking a class on YouTube, and the thing I've learned so much about that is, yes, you need like amazing content, but you also must feed the algorithm. You have to have a good thumbnail, and the people that are really doing this for a living have multiple thumbnails that they swap out on a regular basis, to where it's like you have your content and then you're almost spending as much time on the algorithm. And it's just like, I don't like the way that sounds. So Todd the Gator says, think of the YouTube algorithm as a person at a party that's neutral, and they introduce you to someone new. Depending on how they react to you depends on who else the algo introduces you to. Yeah, that's really it. And if you and they think this person's gonna like you, and that person goes, no. So yeah, a couple questions coming in here. Let's see. Show notes on audio versus YouTube videos, should they be different? If so, how? My clients like the blog-like show notes. That's a great question. I just go copy paste. You know what I mean? So I'm using both now. Is that the right thing to do? Don't know. Because I know when I go to YouTube on a YouTuber, like actually someone who is a quote, like they will wave their flag, hi, I am a YouTuber. There's almost no show notes. It's like, today we talked about this, like it's like 3 sentences and then link.
Yeah.
So
I don't think people are going to the YouTube description for many things. They will go for links. I do see a lot of the more influential YouTubers. They start out with a sentence or two, and then it's basically just links that they've referenced in there and not much more. I don't see, I certainly would not. My show notes now are, I put a lot in the show notes on the page for a different reason. I think I would slim those down and put what's helpful for people. They're going to want to, oftentimes the YouTubers will say, put the, I've put the link to this item in the description for you. I'm not sure YouTube's doing a lot with the description just because it can be so jammed full of stuff,
Yeah.
right? So
Well,
I think maybe they've uh, kind of said, we'll let the description go. I think Brett says thumbnails and titles, and I think there's a
yep.
lot to thumbnail and titles. Listen, that thumbnail thing drives me nuts. I do not get it. I can't stand it. These
Yeah.
pictures of people, with the funny faces and right on. Just drives me crazy. And
Yeah.
the just the blatant I don't know what
Yeah.
to call it. I've
Yeah.
called it yoga pants, right? The blatant yoga pants usage that's going on out there. And you're just like, come on, people. But it sells. I mean, it clicks, so to speak. And so I think those things do matter. I think
Yeah.
YouTube does serve those to the top.
Well, Jeff says timestamps are important because it lets people, jump to different sections. So, and that's the thing that drives me nuts is I get
Yeah.
my timestamps after I've edited it into script. So my timestamps are not accurate, and yet I will throw them into YouTube, knowing that somewhere I'm probably annoying somebody on YouTube going, I clicked on this and it's halfway through this topic that I want to hear. And that's because I'm lazy when it comes to this show on YouTube, admittedly, knowing that like, hey, I hate the fact that you cannot replace a file on YouTube because there's a
Yes.
lot of stuff
Yes.
that
Yes.
I'm like,
Or
yeah,
tie videos together, like from a stats perspective. We'll release something, and then you're like, oh, we need to change out a lower third, and you don't want to lose the stats,
yeah,
right? I mean, you're like, and then you can't. So you put that one unlisted or private or whatever, and you bring a new
yeah,
one in. And you can't associate one with the other.
yeah.
It's
That
it's unfortunate.
drives me
It's unfortunate.
nuts.
Yeah.
So Randy asks, do you guys read? Well, really, let's just go show notes, period. He says on YouTube, but like we asked this at the School of Podcasting this last Friday. And the one thing I go to show notes for, and it's the one thing that will upset me, and I've had people get upset with me. If you talk about something, like we mentioned today, EV MOOCs, we barely mentioned it, but there'll be a link to it because you can click on that. And so we mentioned it's a thing that you can stream with, et cetera, what we used it for. So that's going to be in the show notes. So when you talk about something that's clickable, it drives me, and I hear people say this all the time. Like they'll say, oh, there was this report, yada, yada, yada. And then they'll say something like, well, wait, what? And then you go, I wonder, and they'll even say links in the show notes. And I'll go there and there's no link in the show notes. Or my new favorite that drives me nuts, click on the link and go to our website where we have the show notes, of which there's no show notes. So now I'm really mad because you made me do an extra click. My fingers almost sore from all that clicking, but to me, have the links in the show notes. That's the one. When people go, do you read show notes? And almost everybody at the School of Podcasting said, I go for links. I go for links. So if you're interviewing somebody and it's, if I'm interviewing Tom Webster talking about the audience is listening and you go to the show notes and there's no link to that book on Amazon, you're like, wait, what? How do you spell, audience? Is it one or two D's? Or, you know what I mean? It's like, so links seems to be the thing that people are really looking for in show notes. So that's what I always try to do. And that's why I have Cast Magic. I have a prompt. It's like, what companies were mentioned and what websites were mentioned in this episode. And that's where I go get the links and that whole 9 yards. Cause I know for me, that's what I'm looking for. Chris says, I test different show notes for YouTube. It's more about SEO. So research keywords and tags more than a bunch of words. Chris, do you have a favorite, keyword tool? That's one of the things I've been researching this week is, there's a ton of free stuff, and there's a ton of stuff that's really, really expensive. But, for me, Jim, what do you do do you ever read show notes? And if so, why?
No, I don't. No, and I watch a lot of YouTube, and I don't ever go to the description. Now, I have a highly curated list of folks that I follow. There's episodic content that I'm looking for, every day or every other day or every 3 days. Just depends on when they come out with it. Sometimes, like Colin Furs, he comes out like once a month, so I just wait for those kinds of things to come out. I am your typical subscriber guy who just waits for things to show up in that top box on YouTube. If I haven't seen it in a while, I'll go into my subscriptions to see, maybe I missed it in some way to do it. But then, so with the power outage, I've been thinking about, well, maybe I need a bigger battery backup for the house. So listen, you go in, I put in Blue Eddy AC 500 because that's what I would use. And then I just start watching all of those videos, and YouTube does a nice job then of serving up helpful ones after the other. Every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, I'm going to click on, okay, I'll go to the description to find, the product or whatever. To be honest, I know that product link, this is terrible. I'm going to admit this. This is terrible. I don't click on the link because I'll know it has some embedded, affiliate thing in it,
Yeah.
whatever. And I'll just go to the site and look it up directly because I don't want them hijacking my Amazon account, or I don't want them hijacking, whatever, right? Because it's going to set a cookie. So rarely do I go, just like Jeff C was talking about timestamps. That's not the way I don't go to the description to see if they have timestamps. Very few of my viewers on YouTube are using timestamps. I just go forward, forward. And then sometimes I'll drag my mouse down, and go to the timeline and see. You can
see where it changes. Yep.
Yeah, you're right on. So those are my habits. I am not, while I provide on my website, I provide a summary view with timestamps and details on my website. I don't move that over to YouTube, and you got me thinking maybe I should. But that's kind of my consumerism of YouTube.
We have some DR said I purchased Taja, I'm going to guess TAGAA from YouTube. That is a keyword tracker that ranks it, and also, by the way, creates some really good thumbnails. Is that a AppSumo thing, or was that? And then Chris says, Chris Stone from castahead.net, TubeBuddy is great as a keyword explorer. Also has other tools where you can A/B test stuff. Yeah. I ask a question, I get ignored. Seen these streams before. Well, your Kiwi mate, what is your question? I'll be happy to answer it. Also, I do my best to catch the questions, but I always say, if I missed it, and it's, also like right now we're talking about keywords and show notes. And if you ask, there's a question we're going to talk about in a second about SEO, and we'll get to that. So we got 90 minutes, folks. Strap in. Kim Craggy, hey, how are you? Haven't heard that name in a while. I have to search for stuff I'm interested in. Google interprets what I want and tells me without me even saying the words. Yeah, that's always fun. Let's see. Yeah, yes, it was an AppSumo deal, the Taja or whatever it was. But speaking of that question, since we're kind of on the topic of SEO, Ralph says, speaking of SEO, does it really work to make sure I get the 19 score in pod page for SEO, or am I wasting my time? My official answer is, and this is where other experts won't say this, I don't know. Is there a big difference between 17 and 19? When I do SEO for my site, I look at the stuff that, whether I'm using Yoast SEO or the SEO tools built into pod page, I get it. Hey, this should be somewhere between 50 and 70 characters, and yours is 120. I'll go in and change that. Why? Because it took about 7 seconds. When it says you don't have a keyword, I'll look at one and go, oh, let's put in, Pop-Tarts. Okay, great. Now I have a keyword, whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. But when I start doing things, Jim, because I need to keep using the word Jim in the thing so that the keyword Jim shows up over and over, so that when people search for Jim, they will see that Jim is in my episode about Jim. That's where I'm like, no, people don't talk like that. And I can smell that. I can smell ChatGPT at this point from 5 miles away. I saw one yesterday when I saw an article that was written fairly recently about what's the best place to sell digital downloads. And one of them was Cells. And I was like, I thought Cells went out of business. It was bought by Amazon. And I clicked on the link, and sure enough, I was like, you made a link to a website that's dead. I was like, who would do such a thing? And I was like, oh, ChatGPT. So,
Oh yeah, that's a problem. Listen, that's a serious. If you're using ChatGPT and you're asking it to give websites, that is not good at websites. Just be warned. Chances are those links are not going to work for you.
yeah.
It is not a good website. They're fully formed. They look great. You're thinking, oh, ChatGPT, you are so helpful. It is not helpful in that area. I mean, it's helpful in a lot of things. It does not. It doesn't go out and check for you. So make sure if you're asking for links on ChatGPT, you are checking every single link. It's good. That's a good call, Dave.
Yeah. And then Ralph says the issue is it wants the URL to be no more than 3 words, and having a daily show, I'm fixing to run out of words. Well, this is where I draw the line at SEO. I will do the easy stuff. Granted, if I spent more time, I'd probably get more results. But I do what I can in the time I have, and I should be using a keyword researcher. I've got a couple tools from AppSumo that do that, and there are times when I have the time, I'll do it. But I should have a list of SEO words. If I really wanted to care about SEO, I would go find SEO words that I could rank for, and then make episodes based on those keywords. But I'm more the opposite. I make content based on my audience has said, I have a question about this. And then I go to try to see what keywords in the content that I made that I know is going to resonate with my audience. What are the top keywords in that blog? And even that, I will spend a little bit of time on it, but not always. Here's Craig from Live Well and Flourish. Also, AI goes to college. When using AI for anything important, keep a human in the loop. Yeah, I'm kind of working on an episode about how some things, because there's some really cool things I'm doing with AI. When you are using it to create your content, I think you're making a mistake. If you're using it to shape your content, that's a much better use. But when you are like, oh, I need a script for this, ChatGPT, write me a thing on quilting, like it may not be right. Just, because the biggest thing is it's not your voice. It's not your voice. So where if you type a blog post about quilting and then put that into ChatGPT and go, hey, make this more concise, make it more, okay, now we're basing it on your words. So I'm not, because in fact, I'm getting ready. There are a few AI tools that I have. Like I love Deidre to death. And here's the thing. This is not a cap show or AI bash. It doesn't work for me. Like I did a podcast review for the podcast hot seat, and I interviewed the Legal Pad, I think was the name of it, something legal, and the legal document, maybe, whatever it is. But it's a review show, and I ran it through Cap Show, and Cap Show's like, what do you want this to be based on? And I made the mistake, so it's not a Cap Show. I should have said custom. This is a podcast review. Please point out the good that this person did in the bad. I didn't. And I was like, I'm not really, because I haven't used Cap Show enough. So I picked one, and it wrote an article about like where my target audience were lawyers. And I'm like, no, this isn't what I wanted. So again, that's my fault. And I also know that anytime I run Ask the Podcast Coach through any AI, it goes, because I ran it through Buzzsprout's AI tool. First of all, it took like 45 minutes. And I was like, again, I have a brain and I know how to type. I could have done that in half the time. And when it got done, I was like, but Ask the Podcast Coach is a hard show for AI because they never, ever catch when we go to our awesome supporters. And that's something I want people to jump to, or in some cases skip. Because I know when I listen to the No Agenda show, when they go to thanking their supporters, I'm like, yeah, I don't care, next. And so it's not that AI content, I'm just like, for me, being a teacher and not a marketer, I think in some cases is the problem. Maybe. I just know I keep paying for stuff and going, I'm not using any of this. Like, I'll look at the titles And I'm starting to get tired of the titles because everything is a colon and I'm just like, and the other thing is, back in the day when I used to do this stuff from my brain, I would have people come and they'd be like, I can boost your SEO. Can I give you an audit? And they'd audit me and go, well, you're doing really good. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, what tools do you use? And I go, my brain. Like, I'm writing for people. And so I'm was thinking today, because last week I said my water heater went out. That was a pricey fix. And I'm like, well, you might have to, tighten the buckle here a little bit. And I was like, what am I paying for that I'm not really using? And I'm like, AI tools, because I'm also playing, thanks to Craig over at AIGoesToCollege.com, I'm using Poe, which is basically a bunch of, like, I can say, draw me a picture of a happy horse. And if it comes up and I go, meh, I can right there, it has another image tool. And I'm like, well, draw this in this thing. And there's another, same thing. I can go do this in ChatGPT. And I'm like, try this in whatever Google's thing is and this and that. So I'm kind of like, I get that the cap shows and the pod squeezes and the swell AIs and all that. But even Cast Magic, which I'm almost getting for free because I got it on an AppSumo deal. The only thing I really like about that is when I go pull the URLs and pull the companies out, all their intros and stuff. I'm like, hey there, campers. It's always that kind of, hey there, podcasters today. I'm like, okay, if that's my voice, I hate myself. Like, I don't know. Jim, what are you, are you using AI to like create stuff?
No.
Yeah.
Well, no, yes, some, right? When we think about I drop the audio into Otter to do a transcript, and then Otter's got some AI around it. I use some AI for prompts around social, for work stuff. AI is really good. The versions we have today, the language models we have today, are really good at creating strengths content. And I can say do it in my voice, because there's a lot of my voice out there in that space around that stuff. So that kind of works well. So those kinds of things where it's appropriate, I love on Home Gadget Geeks, I love the prompt. Tell me the products we mentioned during this time.
Yeah.
And it'll just give you a list. Now, I said, give me a list with URLs, and all of the URLs were wrong. So, you got to be careful with that. But there are some very helpful tools that you can use with it to summarize. I mean, it's good at summarization.
Yeah.
And it's good at some creation. I mean, it does do well because it's designed to be a language model.
Yeah.
It does well at some creation,
I like it for brainstorming. I like,
Yeah.
oh, I already had my bullet points, but I forgot about that. And then Ralph brings up a great point. But you can train AI to sound like you based on the development of your prompt. I've worked on this, and AI actually now knows who I am without even asking, which is kind of freaky. Yeah, and that's with everything. One of the things when you buy a new tool and you go, great, you need to put on the calendar, okay, here's the 2 hours I'm going to spend learning this thing, because I haven't. And that's where I thought when I was listening to Craig and he was talking about Poe, I'm like, okay, what I need to do is spend time really learning Poe and which tools to use and things like that. It's not that expensive. They have a free version like every other AI kind of tool. But I was like, I really should, because it's all these other, again, Swell, Cast Magic, Cap Show, all they're doing is tailoring. It's a really well-written script for, like, Cap Show it's great for marketing. Like, if you're horrible at marketing, Cap Show is amazing. And if I had a single topic show that wasn't maybe teaching people, it didn't get the review thing. It really didn't. And again, I think had I said, here's what I want you to write this, I guess a lens, like this, write this through the lens of a teacher. I just didn't want to burn more minutes to basically do the same episode again. And so, but there's a part of me that's like, it's two sides. Either these don't work, or B, I need to spend more time learning how to get the right thing. And I think it's probably more B than A, because they are good. I've seen Cap Show do some amazing stuff. I'm just like, I think the way my content is, I need to train it better. And also, I am, officially dangerous in all of these tools. I really should pick one not because it's the best one or whatever, but whatever's best for me, and then really learn how to make that thing dance, because it's not really, I'm wasting money and I'm wasting time. And I just, in the same way, when you're a consultant, you kind of want to know a little bit about everything, which is fine. But in the end, as a creator, I need to pick one of these bad boys and make it dance and sing or something like that. So Chris says, one prospect, he says, I Googled best podcast producers for hire, and you came up first. Had no idea that happened, but had my webmaster witch do their magic afterwards. So there you go. So yeah, I have seen on YouTube, like I got number one in Google after using ChatGPT, and I'm like, I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm just, there are things where I'm like, Jeff says I totally quit using AI for personal email posts. Yeah, that would be a no for me. My voice is too important. With so much AI content vomit out there, we need to sell ourselves apart. Yep, I totally agree with that. I have heard like form letters and stuff. Hey, Craig was talking about this. Sometimes you have to write a recommendation letter to someone that you're kind of going, what am I going to say here? And that's where ChatGPT can come into play.
You know what I have found? I'm a sharp writer. So that doesn't mean good. I mean sharp. I am short and I'm to the point, and I use no emotion. I don't start like, "Hey, how are you? I hope things are well." I get right to the point when I'm writing. Now, when I'm with people, I'm completely different. When we're talking, I'll always start, "Hey, how's it going? How you feeling? How are things?" Get established that relationship, and then I'll dive into the content and what we're doing. I actually need, and I've been thinking a lot about this over the last couple of years since the pandemic. I actually had somebody say to me, "Hey, your writing is a little different than when you're in person, right?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's good. That's good to know." I mean, I kind of knew it, but I always thought writing was just a utility, not a method of communication. That's how I view writing, because I hate doing it. So I've actually been working on, and ChatGPT has actually helped me in some regards. When I have something to say, I'll take the bluntness, I'll put it in ChatGPT and say, "Make this sound nice."
Ah,
Like,
nice.
and it'll give me it'll soften it for me, right? A little bit, and give me some suggestions, and then I can take that and copy and paste it in. So for me, no, not everybody. Like, there's many of you who are listening out there, many of you in the chat room, you love to write. You're really good at it. I suck. I'm a terrible writer. And so it's been a really good, helpful tool. Someone's like, "Oh, Jeff was mentioning, I would never trust it to be my voice." I can't trust me to be my voice writing sometimes. I almost use it as a coach to be like, "Hey, can you make this not sound like I'm a douchebag?" Kind of thing.
Is there a D
And
douchebag filter I can put
kind
on
of,
this?
yeah,
Yeah.
I like that, D douchebag. So I use it for
Yeah.
me, I use it as a tool that way. For some of you, if you struggle, that may be a good use. Again, I got to do some edits on the back end, but
Yeah.
it
Todd
helps me
said,
out in that one, for sure. Yeah.
Todd says, sounds like you might be more of a technical writer.
No, I'm
Uh,
impatient. I'm an
yeah.
impatient writer. I don't want to write words. Like, I literally hate writing words. I just don't like it. It's something I don't like. So.
Dan says, I tried Poe. By the way, that's just POE.com. And the free version is quite limiting. So I didn't get to test it much. See, I need that. Again, that's a tool I logged in and went, ooh, neato. And then haven't really been back. I was using one called Magi, which was basically the same thing as Poe. I got in early and it was $9, but they have since changed their plans where I was grandfathered in, but it was also really limiting. And I was like, I think I can get more from Poe's free version than the Magi's limited version. It was kind of weird. Chris, again, most everything AI is serving us is giving us emojis and words that we don't use, like Delve and Game Changer. My favorite is Nonetheless. And that was one. There was something that
In a world is another one of those. In a world.
Yeah. Buzzsprout's AI tool had a word for one of the chapters that I didn't even know what it was. I was like, wait, what is it? It was a big 50-cent word. And I'm like, yeah, I would never say that word. Dan says, an old marketing manager told me once that SEO and the algorithm keep changing to try and find good content for people. So keep focusing on that instead of focusing on the current algorithm. Yeah, focus on making good content. That really is the key. One of the things we did this week at Podpage, and it was you'll hear me talk about this on the School of Podcasting, is we're getting ready to roll out an updated dashboard, and primarily we're changing the navigation. And it was so much fun seeing your user, or in our case, podcasters, our audience, face to face. You've got to make that happen. I'm here to tell you, because number one, Brendan and I are living in this new dashboard, and it was fun. By about the fourth person, he had a preview window of what like your episodes would look like on your website, and every single person was like, "Oh, well, this is cool," and they would click on the preview, and there's nothing to click on the preview. Like every single person, like, "Oh, well, so if I want to edit this, click." And so after about the fourth person, he's like, "Well, we obviously need to make that obvious that it's a preview and it's not clickable." And we asked people, like, "What do you do when you log into Podpage?" And they're like, "Oh," almost all of them were like, "Oh, I need to edit the last episode because I want to add the transcript. I want to add some images." And blah. So it was like, okay, so we need to make it so when people log in, how easy can we make it for them to go to their, edit their last episode? And so whether it's via a Google form or something, my little Davism is we need to go from knowing about our audience. Oh, my audience is made up of male or female, age, blah, 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 who think, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, so that's, we know about them. It would be better if we knew them. I know Todd the Gator has a Discord server that he's constantly interacting with people. I think Randy does that as well, but we're still getting comments on AI here. I make sure to go through all AI and eliminate the vast majority of adjectives. Yep. Again, and this is where maybe if you trained it a little more to know your voice, I'm not sure. The Brett Allen show, I used AI once for show notes. It put in an adult website for a great guest with the, not good.
Oops.
This is a fun one. I'm going through this as well, Jim Harold from jimharold.com. In moving hosts, we cleaned up 19 years of show notes. Holy cow. Lots of dead sites. Yeah, I have a dead link checker on my WordPress site, and there are so many dead links, and it's from stuff I've removed. Most of my old episodes are still there, but there were a couple that had, the whole thing was like an interview. I remember one, there was a site called InnerTube. It was SoundCloud before SoundCloud was SoundCloud. And the whole interview was with this guy and what you could do on InnerTube. Well, InnerTube went out of business. And I'm like, well, this episode delivers zero value to my audience. So I pulled it down, not because it sounded bad or all the things that happened on the earlier stuff, but it just didn't deliver any value. So Dan says, I had ChatGPT make up Amazon links to fake movies that it insists are based on a true story. Excellent. I forget what they're calling that now. Hallucinations or something, where AI makes up something that doesn't exist. And then Todd says the number one thing that sways, I think he meant me, to listen to an episode is the title, except for the School of Podcasting, which I listen to regardless. So thank you, Todd. But yeah, your titles that's one thing. Ralph had to run, but Ralph has a show called Ask Ralph, and it's finances from a Christian perspective. And we were talking the one day, and I said, well, wait a minute. I go, your episode title should be the question that you're answering, so that when people go to his show, maybe they type in Christian finance and then they see the questions that he's answering. That's going to help them decide, oh, do I want to listen to this show, or do I want to follow it? Or in some cases, they might just need that one answer to that one question. And so he's now using the question as his title, and his numbers are going up. He's been advertising in Overcast, which seems to be working, but it's not cheap. And then I love this, Chris from castahead.net. I get more SEO best practices by asking new people how they found me. That's the one question. Yeah, because then you can do more of that. And that's one of the things I always ask when people sign up at the School of Podcasting. How did you find me? And almost all of them are, I heard your podcast. On a few I'll get, well, I met you at Podcast Movement Evolutions, or I read your newsletter, but almost all of them, it's like, oh, I found your podcast and you seem to know what you're talking about, kind of thing. But yeah, so titles are important. So that's why I have a single a single tear will come out of my right eye when I see the title of episode 16. And I'm like, oh, you could do so much better than that. So it's tricky. But one thing that doesn't make me cry are our awesome supporters. By the way, and I really mean this, when I say thank you for your support, and I shell out, thousands of dollars for a new water heater, and then like 2 days later, Patreon goes, hey, here's hundreds of dollars. I'm like, thank you, patrons. Holy cow, did that really come in handy? Because I was like, I mean, I used a charge card, which I hate, but it was kind of like I was doing my best to shuffle money. And so when money came rolling in, I was like, thank you. So we really do mean that. Another way you can support the show is, hey, if you have a podcast or you're looking to launch one, check out the School of Podcasting. Use the coupon code COACH. And remember, that comes with not a 7, not a 14, but a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you can join worry-free over at schoolofpodcasting.com. And I now have to say this. I've been saying you should try Podpage for years. And people now go, oh, it's because you work there. No, I've been saying this for years. I love Podpage, and you can check it out. If you want to learn Podpage and see what it does, you can go to learnpodpage.com. And right now, we're back in my favorite tool. If you're on a Mac, use Ecamm to do your streaming. You can check that out at askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm, and Ecamm is ECAMM, and that is my affiliate link. And if you need more Jim Collison, because, he's right there. How can you not want more of that? Then go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And if I can get my button to work, it's time. Yes, it's time for our almost favorite part of the show, and that is there it is. Our time to pick our illegal, our rebel, featured supporter of the week. So will it be Craig from AI Goes to College, or Ralph, or Randy, or there's Chris from castahead.net, or Jody? Well, we're going to find out when we click spin, and round it goes. And the survey says it's going to be Randy over at M2H2. That's a V for V music podcast, Mountain Music Half Hour, and there'll be a link in the show notes to that. That's it's an interesting show, wide range of music. So if you're a person that kind of likes a little bit of everything, then check it out. And Randy, thanks for being an awesome supporter. And if you think this show saves you time, maybe it saves you some money or some headaches, or does it keep you educated, or maybe it just entertains you as you're eating your cornflakes this morning, well, then you should be an awesome supporter too. It doesn't have to be $20. We got lower plans than that, but $20 will get you on the wheel of names. And you can do that by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. So thank you to all the awesome supporters, including those that are in at $10 and $5 a month. I deeply appreciate that. And let's see what else we have. This one I thought was interesting. I've never heard this complaint. And that is, he's talking about unresponsive guests. Dear colleagues, how formal. I could use some advice. I've been running a podcast for a while, like 9 years and 7 solo. So is that 16? Is that 9 years, 2 with co-hosts? Not sure. It doesn't matter. And one thing that's been really frustrating is dealing with unresponsive guests. Some guests have promised to return for another episode, but when I try to follow up, I end up getting no response. Despite their commitment, they've become unresponsive, and after several attempts to reach out, some have already been cut from the lineup. I understand that everyone is tight schedules, but it's frustrating to be left hanging. I'm starting to wear down, and I'm getting tired of sending messages that go unanswered. How do you handle situations like this? Do you have your strategies for re-engaging unresponsive guests, or do you just move on? Would love to hear your experience on any tips that you might have. So I'm not sure I have this problem. And one of the things, now I am not as good at this as I used to be, but I grabbed this idea from Jordan Harbinger. And I as I thought about this morning, I'm like, I really need to up my game on this. But I used to reach out about every 3 to 5 months. So a couple times a year. And it would just be like, hey, Jill, haven't talked to you in a while. Just wanted to check in and see how life is on your side of the glass. That's it. And if they email back, they're like, hey, Dave, great to hear from you. Life is good. Little Jody started kindergarten this year. Can't believe she's so old. Thanks so much for reaching out. That's it. It's not a deep, like, let's talk about the meaning of life and why are we here? No, it's just like, hey, what's up? Haven't talked to you in a while. And sometimes I'll email back and be like, oh man, I can't believe she's 5. Are you kidding me? How is it that the kids keep getting old and we're not getting? It's just a little touch to see what's up, so that when you do see them at Podcast Movement or in a Zoom meeting or whatever it is. So I used to be much better at that, and I was like, ooh, I don't do that as much as I do. In fact, I don't. It's one of those things where the more people you know, the harder it is to do that. But the other thing that you might consider is, hey, they came on your show once and you can't get them to come back. Maybe it wasn't a great experience. There's a thought. Because if I ask you,
them, it's definitely you.
yeah,
right.
Well, and if I say to you live, Jim, hey Jim, thanks for coming on the show. Boy, that was great. Would you be interested in coming back, maybe in the future? You're going to say what to my face?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, as soon as the call is done, Jim's taking off his headphones going, well, that was a waste of 45 minutes.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm out of here. I'm just going to ignore. Oh, I got to go wash my hair. The next time you call back. Right. Yeah, it is. You have to.
I have to. I'd love to come on your show, but I got to wash my hair. I love that.
You gotta check yourself on that one. That is definitely where you're like, oh, am I making this the best experience possible for folks to want to come back and be a part of it? That's when I read that email, I was like, yeah, maybe it wasn't, or it's you're asking too often. And listen, some folks are just busy. My prior full-time co-host on Home Gadget Geeks was awesome. Mike Uyghur, best co-host ever. Well, next to you, Dave, of course. Mike did a great job. I'm glad you weren't listening to that. He does a great job. And since at one point he was like, I can't do this anymore. My family's too busy. And I've had the hardest time getting him back. And it's not because he didn't like doing the show. He loved doing the show. He's just genuinely busy. So there are times in people's lives where you're like, this is where you got to deploy a little bit of grace to people and just say, oh, appreciate it. I understand it's a busy time, some of those kinds of things. And then let it go and ask them again, say, because I do the same thing. I've had folks on and say, hey, first time I always say, hey, you are awesome. If I ask you to come on again, would you say yes? I ask them on the show.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll be, oh yeah, of course. And I've never had anybody not show back up after that, but if they do, if they're busy, if they say they're busy, give them some grace. Don't write them off. Don't, just because one time they said no, or maybe even 2 times, or maybe even 5 times, come back. You never know what's going on in their life. I mean, I just had a guest who had been 2 years since I'd had him on. And when I had him back on the show, I was like, hey, so catch us up. And he was like, yeah, I had this major move in my life and all these things were going on. And you're like, oh yeah, no wonder he wasn't available. No wonder he hasn't been creating YouTube content. No wonder. Right. So I think we just need to have a little more grace for people.
Yeah. Danny says, I just don't reach out again after the first follow-up. Just it's too much hassle, whatever. And we should say, holy cow.
Whoa!
Thank you to DR for the $10 super chat.
Yeah, right on. Right on.
Really appreciate that. Yeah, the other thing about that is, because I did go on a show that I was on before, and they're really new. Like really new. And I had to kind of check my ego because I'm back again and it was not smooth. It was not good. It was, and the whole time in my brain, I'm like, why am I here? To the point where, like, when I see somebody on Dancing with the Stars, and this is where I'm like, I need to check my ego a bit. But if I see somebody on Dancing with the Stars, there's a part of me that goes, ooh, they're on their career must not be good if they're appearing on this show. And so there was a part of me that I was like, is this a Dancing with the Stars? And I was like, no, that makes it sound like I'm too big to be on this show. And I try to be like, I've been on many a episode 1 or episode 3. This was a person that needed more practice. It was, I want to say, we'll say poop show. It was a poop show. And I was to the point where I was just like, yee, and to me, I'm thinking this is going to need a lot of editing because there were just unprepared, more planning equals less editing. And there was apparently no planning. And it was, yeah. So if that person asked me again to do something, I'm probably going to go either A, I will ignore their Facebook chat because a lot of people love to ping me on Facebook, which is fine, but I don't want to block them because on one hand, I want to be encouraging. That's where I get stuck. I want to be encouraging and keep going, Buckaroo. You can get there. I just like, but can you? Yeah. So I don't know. Does that make me sound like a horrible person?
A little bit. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, Dancing the Cha-Cha, Dave Jackson.
Yeah.
And his partner. No. Yeah. Hey, listen, it's a fine line we walk on that because there are you and I have done first episode guest appearances on places, and it's their first one, and you gotta give them you gotta cut them some slack, and then if they ask you at 50 or whatever, go back and listen, see if they've improved, see how they're doing, and even then, maybe it's worth just being on there to just encourage them. That doesn't always have to. And I'm not saying this about you, Dave, but it doesn't always have to be about you, right? It can be about them. And you can go on there and have a great conversation with them. You may brighten their day. You might be the best part of their day when you're there.
Well,
and so it may not be for the podcast, right? It may just be because you're a nice guy and you do it that way. I'm sure you've done plenty where you've been like, I'm just going to show up today because it's the right thing to do.
Right. That's basically why I went back. I was like, well, maybe it won't be as bad as it was the last time. And I was like, no, it's still kind of,
Well, then you write it off. And you're like, hey, it brightened their day, right?
That's it.
You were there.
Yeah. And that might be the encouragement they need or whatever. So, and Dan says, or it might be that people are actually busy. Yeah. I had some people wanted to schedule stuff with me. And in the next 2 weeks, I'm on the road. I'm in Atlanta next week, and then I'm in DC the week after that. And I'm like, I'm really don't want to do stuff and have to rely on hotel Wi-Fi. So I was like, can we do this in September maybe? So you never know. Let's see what else. Yeah, Gary says sometimes people are just busy, and so it is what it is.
Sometimes they are or unresponsive, or something's going on in their life, and they'll get back to you at some point and say, hey, I'm terribly sorry. Can we do this again? And don't do the dead to me thing. Just say yes. Yeah, I'm glad it's happening now. I will graciously have you back. Now, I'll be honest. I wish sometimes I have a regular rotating group of guests that come on, and they're rotating in the sense that just when I think about them, I ask them. But I always say to them, hey, if you have something interesting, just ping me. And we'll get you on the show. Sometimes I want them to come to me and say, hey, I have something interesting to talk about. Can I be on the show to talk about it? And just this week, a prior guest pinged me on Discord and said, hey, I got a lot of things to talk about. Can I come on? And I'm like, absolutely. How about the 29th or whatever day it was? So I try to set it up in a way because not everybody has gadgets in their life all the time.
Right.
But somebody gets an interesting gadget. By the way, chat room, as you're out there, this is an open invite to you too. If you had some interesting gadgets and you wanted to be on Home Gadget Geeks and you wanted to talk about it, contact me. Jim@theaverageguy.tv will get you on the program, right? I've had several from the chat room do that. For some, after I've had them on 1 or 2 times, I get the feeling like, okay, they're not doing this all the time. I'll wait for them to ping me back, or I'll give it 6 months or a year or some of those kinds of things. So I try to figure that out. I'm not always successful with it. Sometimes I've pinged them and I'm like, hey, do you have anything to talk about? And they're like, no, I don't. Now, Jay Franzi, who's become a really, really good friend, Jay will come on my show in a pinch and he'll help me just make stuff up.
Nice.
So that's a friend. Like, that is a friend who I'll be like, hey, Jay, I know it's Tuesday, but can you show up on Thursday and just hang out with me while I do this? absolutely. He always says, absolutely. He'll do anything. In fact,
Nice.
he was scheduled to do the show that I asked him on Tuesday. He said yes. On Wednesday, we had the storm. On Thursday morning, I had to say, we're not doing a show. Sorry, dude. And he's like, no problem. You
Yeah.
know, that works out. So those with guests, just, you know, be graceful, be full of grace. There we go. Be full of grace when you're working with folks, and understand if they don't get back to you, it doesn't mean they don't like you. They just, maybe they were busy.
Yeah. The Stephanie says, telling someone you're dead to me because they didn't reply to an email is so wild. I do my
Yeah.
best to not have a you're dead to me list. I mean, there are
Yeah.
people that I like more than others, but I mean, my ex-wives are not dead to me. You know what I mean? It's like life's too short. And there are people like there's a guy that he and I kind of got into a fit about listen notes. And, you know, I've seen him at events and I'll say hi. And I'm like, you know, because we disagree on this one thing doesn't mean we can, you know, there are probably a bunch of stuff we do agree on. So Jody says, hey, enjoy Atlanta. Hey, you know how much I'm going to enjoy Atlanta? I'm going to go, I think we decided on dinner with Chris from castahead.net. That's one of the coolest things about when I go places. It still kind of boggles my mind that there are typically people that listen to my show kind of wherever I go. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. So yeah, we're going to go to the Atlanta meetup. If you're in Atlanta, I should know this. I want to say the 15th. It's a pod tour. So it's Chris Krimitsos and the gang coming into Atlanta. And I was like, oh, I'll go there. So yeah, to me, life's too short to have somebody who's dead to you, unless they were really, really a weenie. Stephanie has a question. Speaking of gadgets, anyone have a favorite light up keyboard they love? I want one. Also interested in a good chair. Jim, you're the gadget guy. I got nothing in this department. Whatever this chair is, I like it because it's mesh. Let me get out of the way here. But the whole thing is mesh, so it breathes. So
Yeah, I do. I like those as well. You get what you pay for with chairs.
Yeah.
You know, the more expensive they are, to a point. To a point, you have to kind of, do I like cushion? Do I like, in your case, like mesh? I run a little warm, so I kind of like the mesh chairs. They don't last as long, but they vent well. Also, you know, you can get a fan behind them if you need to, or for whatever purposes. So I like those. I like that style. With light up keyboards are kind of a commodity at this point. And unless you're spending like 99 cents at Walmart on a keyboard, you're going to probably get a good one. My recommendation would be go to any of the big box stores where they're out. I think Walmart actually does this pretty well. And find a style that you like. Like, because for everybody, the keyboard's a kind of a personal item in a lot of ways. The way it looks, the way it's laid out, the size of the little chiclet, you know, the keys themselves, the way they're laid out, whether it's ergonomic or not, whatever, right? And then also there's a thing with sound on keyboards. Like, some people like them to make the clickety clack sounds, and some people don't, right? I prefer super quiet keyboards. I just brought a keyboard home from work. It's a Mac keyboard that I really like, the really expensive, like $130 keyboards. It's wired. But I like the quietness of it. So I would say try and get out in town, find a place that was, you know, where you can try them out, get a style. And then if you don't want to buy them locally, you can go on Amazon or Walmart.com or whatever, from a pricing standpoint. But I would try them out first. Just make sure they're backlit, right? The light up keyboards, that's what they say. They're backlit. And then you can get them that way. That's what I would do.
Yeah, Craig says I'm huge Keychron fan, not too expensive but high quality. Here's the weird thing: I've never heard of a lighted keyboard. I mean, who's typing in the dark? I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah, no, most laptops have backlit keyboards that
Well, that
when
I've
they
seen.
turn on,
Yeah.
right? They come on, yeah, and they make regular ones that are backlit as well. It's not necessarily in the dark, Dave, and I know you were just joking,
Right.
but it's for some people it's just a visual thing, and it just works better for them.
I know gamers love it when everything matches with their blue light. Dan
Oh, for
says,
sure.
I love my Aeron chair, AERON chair. from Herman Miller, but they're
Herman
super
Miller.
expensive.
Ching. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
I
say Herman Miller, you are
yeah.
going to spend some money on a chair. That's for sure.
I know for me, I think I got mine from like Office Max or one of the Staples, something like that. Because I had a high back leather chair and it was cool. You would sit in it and you're like, oh yeah. You kind of rock back and forth. This is comfy. And then an hour later, 2 words you really don't like to talk about, butt sweat. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of stewing in my own juices. Like this is not comfy. And you're in
Yeah.
short. It
Yeah.
just So
No,
yeah.
yeah. No.
Ray says, I just replaced my Microsoft keyboard that lasted over 10 years. I'm struggling to get up. I actually just bought, and man, they're expensive. I bought a Mac keyboard because if all goes well this weekend, I will be ditching the PC out of this room. And I'm tired of doing the whole weird, yep, there it is. Jim's got his Mac keyboard and he's all set to go. So I just got tired. And there's an actual delete key on the keyboard that I'm hoping I don't have to do the weird control backspace to delete something. I find it odd that there's no delete button, and the delete button I have on my PC keyboard does not delete things when I'm on my Mac. And I was like, okay, I'm tired of control C. I want, so that's the plan at least.
Yeah. Well, if you have a Mac, I'm driving a Mac primarily off of this, but I'm using Synergy to run the Windows PCs. And there are some Windows key C that does one thing on Windows and does a different thing on a Mac. I mean, similar, but you got to do some. So there are those if you're going across, Mac and Windows. One keyboard for both. You got to kind of remember, okay, which OS am I on for that?
It drives me bonkers. Yeah, I'm constantly on my PC, and when I hit, because I have to use the Windows flag for control.
Yep.
On my Mac, and when it's kind of, I'm like, oh, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
Todd said I would recommend an executive office chair, leather with a high back, and I use it in real life business. But I spent a lot of time in it. Also, the purple chair seat mats are amazing. Oh, there you go. So he likes the butt sweat. I do not. Maybe Todd's butt doesn't sweat. I don't know. He's got one of those cool buttless or sweatless butts. I'm not sure.
Some people's butts are cooler than other people's butts.
Mine is, it's, high temperature.
Wonder how AI is going to handle this conversation.
Yeah, that's it. We're going to get banned probably. Oh, did you guys hear, without getting political, can we mention this without getting political? But here's the thing. I'm happy it's gone, but people are losing it because how it was removed. And that's our good friend Garm, the thing that was saying, you are brand safe, Jim Cullison. People can advertise on you. And here's why people think it's bad. Elon Musk, because Garm said Elon's not a good guy to advertise on, and all these sponsors. And same thing with the guy from the Daily Wire, whose name I could never remember. But far right-wing people. There was a thing in Congress about this that I watched. I actually watched like 4 hours of a 9-hour hearing. But in the long run, Elon was basically, enough of this. I'm suing these guys. And they folded. So no more Garm. And part of me is like, yay. Because I was not a fan of the brand safe. To me, brand safe is boring. And when I asked, I asked my buddy Glenn, I said, what do you think of that, Glenn? And he said, Dave, you need to move that button somewhere closer so I can go.
Don't be boring.
Yeah. And so
I could have just said it for you.
Yeah. That's true. And so for me,
don't be bored.
So it was just one of those where, without really looking into Garm, I just keep hearing stories where they were getting things wrong. Like somebody would be like, man, that's the bomb. And then they would get flagged for, talking about, whatever. Or if you said ivermectin and whatever else, that stuff, you get flagged. And I was like, okay, I get what you're trying to do. I just was not a huge fan of, and I forget what it stood for, but they basically so everybody hates the idea, because if Elon Musk put 10,000 wells into Africa, they would still find a way to go, that's horrible. You shouldn't be doing that. Somebody, so I get everybody's hate for Elon Musk. I could take or leave the guy. I think he's a little weird and whatever, and you go do your rocket thing, buddy. But the fact that he basically threatened to sue. Well, he was suing them. He wasn't threatening. And they went, yeah, we're done. And so I was like, well, I'm kind of glad that it's, let's go back to the drawing board and come up with a better idea than, stalking podcasters on and off their podcast so that we can decide if your brand's safe or not. I'm like, how about we just go back to the following program? The opinions expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of their sponsors. Let's just do that. It's a lot less cheap. It's cheaper. It relies on people having common sense. And I don't really care if Kraft supports Palestine or not. I just want some mac and cheese.
Man,
So
you're covering them all this morning.
yeah. Let's just gas on
Wow.
the fire. Yeah.
The
He
views
said,
expressed by Dave Jackson are not necessarily the views expressed by Jim Collison.
yeah. So it was just, I saw that in the news and I was like, how do you talk about this without getting political? And I'm like, the answer is you don't. So let's move on. Back to chairs. Oh, we already did that one. Okay. Gamers are the kings of comfy chairs because they do sit there for quite a bit. Also, Rich says you can find whatever it is, Aaron chairs. Is that the one by the really?
That's the Herman Miller chairs. Yes.
Herman Miller used on Craigslist. You might also try Facebook Marketplace. Facebook Marketplace is a dangerous place for me. Every time I go there, I end up like, ooh, I could get this or that.
Sometimes business clearance sales, they'll advertise these on Facebook Marketplace where and I think coming up lately with some of the business problems we've had in the office space with people being laid off and such, they're getting rid of equipment. Oftentimes they sell computers and stuff, but the office chairs that they do sell, sometimes you can get a great deal. I mean, businesses do not buy cheap chairs.
No.
And they last forever. I mean, I had an office chair at Gallup that I think was a couple years old when I got it, and I had it for 15 years. And finally and I loved it. It was so comfortable. And the office guys were like, "Hey, that chair doesn't match anything anymore. We need to take it from you." I'm like, "You're going to have to wrestle me for it." And they're like, "No, we're just going to take it." So I got a new chair. I don't like it as much, but sometimes you can get good office chairs that way, and they're about half price if you buy them that way.
I love our chat room. Next $9 shirt from Sticker Room. My butt is sweating. There you go. Yeah. I just had
Craig, by the way, there's a super chat in there from Craig before it goes away.
Holy cow. Yes. Thank you very much. I have to have Glenn and David Lee Roth at the Matter.
Whoa!
Yeah. So yes, from Craig, super $20 from Live Well and Flourish at livewellandflourish.com. I should know.
Towards the hot water heater, by the way. That needs to go right to the hot water heater.
Yeah.
Dave Jack. Right
that was, it had been a while since I was like, should we do this or that? Start looking to the bank account because I was moving money around and I'm like, if this happens and I got to have money for podcast movement, and it's like, so I really do appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chris has a great point. Is it money for the Herman Miller chair or money for the back surgery on my herniated disc?
Oh, yeah.
That
Buy
is
the chair.
Yeah. Dan says, I managed to get my Herman Miller chair, just like you mentioned, for free because the company was going out of business and they were throwing them out.
Yeah. Sometimes they're crap, by the way.
Right.
People have worn them out. You don't want to know what's happened on that chair. But sometimes sometimes they're good. So it's a good thing to watch out for sure.
Yeah. Going back to the guest talk, Jeff C has a great point. Repurposing your content and making your guests look really good makes them want to come back on the show and helps you get great new guests. And when they see how you treat the past ones. Yes, that's absolutely true. Because Jeff makes it. I got to go back. It's in my list of watch later, but Jeff had Mike Russell from Music Radio Creative, but Mike saw the writing on the wall because he had a voiceover. He still has voiceovers over at Music Radio Creative, but Mike was like, when he saw, 11 Labs come on. So Mike jumped in heavy into AI and language models and that whole 9 yards. So he's not abandoning voiceover, but he's kind of like, well, the people that are going to get these jobs are the people that know he's really into AI, much like Craig and much like Larry Roberts, and so it's on Jeff's show, and it's in my save for later list on YouTube. So I'll definitely check that out. See, and that's something that will be in the show notes. So I just talked about something. People are like, oh, that sounds good. So I will get the links to that. And DR says, I keep getting warnings about Facebook Marketplace as it's a scam. Be careful.
Sure.
It's a phony item. Yeah, I'd be careful.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
I've bought a washer, a dishwasher off there, and I bought a rowing machine, really expensive rowing machine during COVID that was cheap. And so the fact that I could actually go see them, granted, you can buy microphones that look like they're from Shure and they're not. So you have to, buyer beware. And Jody's got to ask. Look, I got to ask. What in the world do people use stickers for? Every time I get those, I end up tossing them. And for me, it's a very old one, but I have a old iPad. And so we got I Am Salt Lake. We got Podcasters Roundtable, a little we got the old school of podcasting logo, Congressional Dish, and what else is on here? Social Media Marketing World and Girl in Space. So for me, I was like, what am I going to do with a sticker? I'm like, oh, I'll put it on here and, but I think this is an iPad 2. Like it's really old. And back in the day, right? iPads used to be somewhat affordable. It wasn't like you were buying a brand new computer. And now because they do so much, you kind of are buying a brand new computer. So, but when people send me like I have like 4 or 5 pod page stickers, and I was like, my iPad's kind of full. If I had a guitar case, I might stick them on my guitar case. Jim, what do you do with stickers? Anything?
Yeah, I actually have a wall over here that we stick them on that we see. That's not the best use of them. YouTubers use them better than anybody, and they put them in their field of view, or
Yeah.
if it's a YouTuber that's moving around, they're in different spots, strategic ads. They swap stickers so that they, YouTubers are on, they send each other stickers so they show up. It's a mild form of advertising. That's what they're used for. I don't think, some of us put them on our laptops and some of those I was never very big into that. I did put some on a computer, and then I gave that computer away, and I had to peel all the stickers off because I was like, they don't want these stickers, kind of thing. So if you're not into it, Jody, if you're not into it, that's okay. You don't have to be. They appeal to there are some people who just love stickers.
Oh, man. They're all about the stickers.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I don't know if we planned it this way, but Randy has noticed that your shirt matches your lower third.
Yeah, it does.
He's
nice.
fashionable like that.
Yeah, this is my green work outside shirt after the show. So I'm going to go outside and mow the lawn and kind of just ready for it. And I don't even comb my hair in the mornings when I wake up. I just come down. I want people to feel comfortable. We get very few, but I want people very comfortable calling in. You don't have to comb your hair. You don't have to have a nice shirt. Just show up on the program. And the shirt doesn't even have to advertise for something. This was a race from 2013.
There you go.
Yeah.
I know we're up against time, but Ray from Around the Layout podcast, it's all about model trains. And he made a box car with his logo on it. And then he actually, like, it's I don't know what I've heard other things where people send it to the next person who sends it to the next people. So people are getting Ray's train, connecting it to their train. One guy made a YouTube video about it. Like, here is the Around the Layout train and all these cool videos. And it's kind of cool because it's a model train, but when you put the camera like down on the track, it looks like a real train is coming at you because of the scale of it. And so Ray actually has a thing on his website about like stickers. Like if you want to put an Around the Layout sticker, like if you want to basically recreate his car, you can do that. And that just shows you like that's a truly engaged audience. And I remember when he was telling me that story about how people are just like, well, can I get the car? Can I get the car next? Can I get in line? And it's like, it's crazy. So there's an example of stickers. People might want to do that. Yeah. So it's
definitely, there's a sticker culture, there's a sticker culture. Not everybody's in it. You don't have to be in it. You don't have
No.
to get.
Well-
I'm on and off with it, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a culture.
Well, LC Escobar is like really into pens, like pens and writing, and like they're having a meetup for pen people at Podcast Movement. And I was like, so there are sticker people, there are pen people, there are butt sweat people, everybody has their group,
Yeah.
So,
right on.
But Jim, what is?
No judgment? No judgment there. You can have fun. It's okay.
Oh, here we go. DR says, I used to fill up my Trapper Keeper with them. There's a phrase I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah. Right on.
Trapper Keeper. So, if you're in Atlanta, I will see you next week. I'm looking forward to that. Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, I spent a solo show talking about all the things I had to do with technology to get through this 100-hour power outage that we had. So if you're interested in that at all, generators and lights and some of those kinds of things, it's available right now, theaverageguy.tv or homegadgetgeeks.com.
There you go. On the School of Podcasting, I mentioned how Podpage was interviewing their customers. We actually got to interview Miss Eileen. When I saw her on the list, I'm like, oh, she's going to be awesome. And she brought exactly what we're looking for and feedback. So thanks to Miss Eileen for that. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that and how you can do that and probably should be doing that with your audience, which is weird because I realize so many podcasters are like capital I introverted. And I'm like, oh, but you learn so much and how to deal with the crushing blow when you have 2 no-shows in a row. I'm like, oh, really? Really? You couldn't have said I'm not coming? But thanks to everybody. Thanks to Dan from Based on a True Story Podcast.com and podcastbranding.com. Thanks to Mark. We will see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.